Good day, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This is the continuation of our Bible Contradiction series, and we're on contradiction number 20 of 400 and something. So we're going to be here a while, okay? There's a lot of these videos to come. Anyway, so today's particular contradiction concerns the following. Let's go and have a look-see at the source. Here we go. Again, just to repeat for those who are watching this video and haven't watched any of the others, because the guys that did this particular list repeated a question, we are therefore sort of the numbers don't add up. So we are one number behind the actual number here because they repeated a question. So we just skipped the question and went on to the next one. So we are behind or ahead or whatever. So we have the following verses. Did the city of Ai exist after Joshua destroyed it? And here are the source verses according to which they say there is a contradiction. Now let's go straight away to those sources. It says here, and Joshua burnt Ai and made it a heap forever, even a desolation unto this day. Unto this day, right? And then if you go over to the book of Nehemiah, when Nehemiah was taking the census, now Ezra had taken the same census a few years before Nehemiah, and it says here, the men of Bethel and Ai, 123. So apparently this is a contradiction. Now, why they believe it's a contradiction, I'm not entirely sure, right? I'm not entirely sure, because I guess if you want to be right, so let's look at this very. So it seems that if in the Nehemiah, right, now we need to understand something. The period between Joshua and Nehemiah, so these two events, is almost 1,000 years. So you're looking at about 950, 960 something years, if my numbers are correct. That's a long time. Now, what happens? Okay, so let's look at the first verse, right? Let's have a look at the very first verse. And Joshua burnt Ai, made it a heap forever, even a desolation unto this day. All right, so whoever's writing this, right, is writing an account of what happened, and is writing it after the events, okay, after the events. And so even till today, this is a desolation, and made it a heap forever. Okay, so the idea is that this particular area was not to be inhabited ever again. Now, we actually have this issue in other parts of the Bible. In other parts of the Bible, specifically where the prophet Ezekiel prophesies the fate of Tyre, the city of Tyre, and then some people are like, oh, well, because he says it will never be built again, and people are like, oh, well, Tyre actually exists today. But what people don't understand is that the original Tyre and the Tyre which exists today are not the same city, right? And are in actually different locations, okay? So you can name the city, so you can rebuild a city. First of all, you know, there's almost 1,000 years, so they don't think to themselves, well, maybe they actually rebuilt the city or built another city near the old one and called it Ai. Okay, which is actually happens a lot in those days. If a city is destroyed, they won't necessarily build it in. So that city that was destroyed will never be inhabited. It was a rubble. It will never be rebuilt again, and that's perfectly legitimate. It was never built again. And for those of you who are interested, this if you look at the picture here, they've actually discovered what they believe is the ancient city of Ai. All right, for those of you that are interested in archaeology and stuff like that. So this is a failure. This seems to be a failure on the individual's part to distinguish different times, to distinguish all kinds of things, you know. It doesn't, first of all, this doesn't affect doctrine at all, as we keep repeating until the cows come home, right? Does it affect doctrine? No. This is only a contradiction if you believe that the Bible needs to be the way that the hysterical King James only type people are, right? And it must be there was never copyist error. Basically, you can only believe that this is a contradiction if you as a Christian believe in this like fundamentalist, not even fundamentalist, I hate that word, right? Believe in this fanatical Christian King James only type of mentality, which interestingly enough is the exact same straw man mentality that people like Bart Ehrman, right, have, where they believe, where someone like Bart Ehrman would assert that God should have preserved in some miraculous type of fashion his word, the original text, somehow in some holy thing, and we should still have it exactly without any no, which is rubbish. It's a straw man. Right? If you know anything about how the Bible is transmitted and how God intends for these kinds of things to happen, how for the things to be spread and stuff, God was never interested in central authorities and stuff. Never, ever. This is an utter straw man of what sane majority Christianity throughout the ages have always looked at or concerned themselves with when it comes to the Bible, right? There's always been knowledge of certain things. So that's the only way, right? If you have this total straw man view of what the Bible is how its preservation is supposed to be like. So when it's talking in this sense here, made it a heap forever, even a desolation unto this day, right? So there's no contradiction, because at the time of writing it, this was still a desolation, and this here, a heap forever, might have actually been hyperbole on the part of the individual who's writing it, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong, right, ladies and gentlemen, there's actually absolutely nothing wrong with understanding that the people who are writing these things added their own flair, right? Because they do. You see it throughout the Bible, where the individual writing the text or whatever adds his own bit of thing, and sometimes things are not meant literally, okay? So that's one possibility. Right, that's one possibility, a desolation unto this day. So at the time of writing this thing is still desolate, no one lives there, it's just been made a heap, and as far as he's concerned, made a heap forever, because he flattened it, and it's still uninhabited. All right, this might be hyperbole. Now if he meant it literally forever, it could still be true, because, right, it could still be true that the original city was never rebuilt, but that another city had been built to replace it somewhere in the same region nearby, but not the actual city itself, and they just called that other city in memory of the previous city that had been destroyed. Right? That's another possibility. So the individual that says this is a contradiction has to establish these points, okay? Has to establish these points. Otherwise, it's not a contradiction. Another thing. Here, right, when we look at this is taking the census, right? We're going to look here. It's taking the census of the people, of where they were from. Now, just because a lot of time, we need to understand, a lot of time, sometimes a city, especially if it was a capital, would have the same name. So this capital city sometimes derived its name from the name of the region that it was built in. Okay, so you can have and then the region, however far that stretches, could be. So for example, if we look even today at London, you have the city of London, which is a small thing in the middle of Greater London. Okay, so you could flatten that, and then you could still, and even if no one ever lived there again, you could still say the people that came from London. Why? Because the region is still called London. Right? Are you with me? Okay, so this could be it. We understand here that in the census they are concerned with which regions these individuals come from. Not necessarily cities, but regions or even cities, right? They don't necessarily make a distinction, right? And whoever was born in that region, right? Because I imagine that whatever the case might be, because I was the region was encompassed then by Israel. Okay, and so people might have lived there again or been born in that region or whatever, even though the original city was never built up again so that it became a city again. It doesn't mean that nomadic people didn't settle there or whatever the case might be, or that people didn't settle the region in some manner or capacity. And so that when the census here is being taken, it's referring to the people from that particular region, or maybe the descendants of that particular of anyone who survived. So there may have been people who were pardon me, people who were native to the city, right, but who were not there when the city was destroyed, and so their offspring survived, right, and this is tracing their lineage. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that the city has A, been rebuilt, or B, been that another city was rebuilt in close proximity or in the same region and renamed I, or that or that people were still being born there or whatever. But maybe this concerns genealogy, and because the people were very, very concerned with origins and where you were from and your ancestors and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't establish anything. There's no contradiction here. This is just a failure this is just a complete failure to really deal with the text in a fair way, and not go off half-cocked like hysterical Christians do when it comes to issues of the Bible. So you have the hysterical Christians shouting at atheists, and then you have hysterical atheists shouting at the Christians. And one of the reasons why this is why I bring this up, right, is because even though I say hysterical atheists, you know, you have sort of the hysterical people of the two groups sort of shouting at each other. This, for those of you that are watching this particular video for the first time, right, we need to understand the following, right? This is not made by a hysterical atheist. This was made by the Reason Project, right? This was made by the Reason Project. The Reason Project is operated by a gentleman called Sam Harris. Now, Sam Harris is by no means hysterical. He's not a hysterical individual, but they have this thing called the Reason Project, and the Reason Project, as far as this particular thing, I'm not going to comment on other stuff that they've done because that's irrelevant for this video. But as far as this concerned, the use of reason was not used here at all. This was completely idiotic. So what you actually have is a reasonable or otherwise reasonable individual responding to what hysterical Christians say. This is Sam Harris. I know Sam Harris, and even though a lot of his stuff, he's an intelligent man, I actually kind of like the guy. He's very soft spoken, very you know, he's got goodwill, right? I mean, I actually kind of like the guy and stuff like that. But he in no way does he go into he's not honest with things the way he's supposed to. Sometimes I think sometimes the fact that he's highly educated is his downfall, because he's presumptuous. Because clearly I don't know how much he was involved with this, because I know other people were involved. Maybe he just trusted whoever built this and they just used it. But Sam Harris clearly did not vet this before endorsing it on his website. This is just absolute nonsense. I mean, every single thing that we've been through so far has just been utter nonsense. That anyone who actually cared about the truth, as in the way that Sam Harris and these fellows pretend to, at least, right? Whether they actually mean it or not, we don't know. We don't know a person's heart. But that they at least pretend to or claim to, you should know this. This is just so, this is ridiculous, you know? So no, this is not a contradiction, ladies and gentlemen. It's just, it's nonsense, basically. So the person's not paying attention. They haven't established that this is the same time, same place. What's the little saying? It's same type, same place, same manner. You have to establish those things in order to establish a contradiction, and many other things. Many other things that, manner, it generally encompasses all the kinds of things that you need to, and they don't do it. They just seem to ignore that, and they just, oh, is it an apparent contradiction? Yes. Well, then no further in-depth study, it's a contradiction, right? So it's ridiculous, right? And by the way, here's the thing. As an atheist, I kind of don't blame him, because he's an atheist. Why would he want to read in-depth Bible study? But here's the biggest issue, right? Is the fact that apparent Bible contradictions actually causes many Christians to lose their faith, right? And now it's understandable for an atheist to not go in depth, but it shows you the shallowness of many Christians, not only many Christians themselves, but the shallowness of Christian teaching, that such shallow, stupid arguments, unresearched, unreasonable arguments, can destroy a person's faith. It just shows the paucity and the lack of Christian education out there, right? And this is one of the things that I myself am personally so sick and tired of. I am sick to death. You can't understand. Sick to death of the perpetuation of ignorance within our churches. Any church. I'm not just talking about my own. Any church. The perpetuation of ignorance, where people have their pet, you must only preach the gospel, or you must only preach this, or you must only preach that. And then you have pastors, preachers, people go to church every Saturday or every Sunday, whatever it is that you go, and you go there to church, you do your Bible studies, you do whatever it is, and then you leave church as ignorant as you were when you entered. And I see this all the time. And then the poor minister. First of all, a lot of the ministers are totally useless. They don't know. They can't preach worth a damn. Okay. First of all, they just no idea. They're boring. It's just the same thing. A lot of them just recycle their sermons. They just recycle their sermons. There's no inspired preaching anymore. And not only that, but then the congregation, they fidget. They couldn't be asked. They're just at church because they're ticking a box. Look at me, good Christian, I've been to church, right? And then, they start looking at the clock. When is the preacher going to finish preaching so that I can go home? So it's a vicious circle. The preachers are a lot of the time totally uninspiring and totally uninspired. And then the congregation is also just completely useless. They don't support the preacher and tell it, listen, preacher, we need a little bit more meat. No, they just want to go and feel good. They don't want to be challenged. And it's just this vicious, pathetic cycle. I'm so sick of it. I can't even tell you. It's I don't even know what to do about it. I preached. I'm a lay preacher, for those of you who don't know. I went and I preached up in Manchester, and I'm not saying that I'm wonderful. I'm not wonderful. I've got a lot of problems, right? I'm not even a particularly good speaker. My ADD and my Tourette get in the way, right? But I went and I preached this one sermon in Manchester. I was invited, and I tell you something. I had 13-year-olds. I had 11 to 13-year-olds come to me to shake my hand and say, you know what, that's the first time I ever listened to a sermon. You really touched my heart, and you got into something that was burning in my soul, that I needed to hear, that I needed my parents to hear, and all these kinds of things, while it was bittersweet, because I was pleased that I was able to do that, but at the same time I was so angry that what the hell are people doing, that these children are orphaned in this spiritual way, that this is the kind of reaction I'm getting. It's ridiculous. It's pathetic. But anyway, what are we going to do? That's why I've got this channel, because I'm going to try and do something else and do my, I don't know, just, there's my 2 cents. So be it. At least I tried, who knows? So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. That is not a Bible contradiction. That's rubbish. That's people being silly. So Thank you for watching. Cheerio. Goodbye.